here at CVU. Welcome to our, gosh, I don't know how many years some of us have been doing this. It's probably close to 15 years that Sarah and I have been doing this, and I'm with.
Hi, I'm Sarah O'Hare Hughes. I'm one of the counselors in the Chittenden House.
So our evening tonight is really pretty. Some of us have been doing this. It's probably close to pretty informal. The YouTube's now playing, and so it's feeding back so we can watch the chat. So that's one of the things to start off with is that if you have questions for any of our panelists, we have a list of questions that regularly come up in our junior meetings and are questions that Sarah and I have used over the years with our panelists that we think are worth asking our panelists as our juniors begin to explore this college search and college application process. So if you have questions, put them in the chat and we will do our best to get to them. But a couple housekeeping pieces. This week, we're just in a department meeting and Rye Hoffman, our director, is talked this week about sending links to SCORE, which is CVU's new Naviance. It is the platform students will use to send all of their transcripts, letters of rec, search for colleges. They'll do all that stuff through SCORE. Rye is going to send a link to juniors so that they can begin to access their SCORE platform. And then there are always some really good pieces of information and links on the CVU School Counselor Direction Center platform. There's a School Counselor podcast, which I'm a part of, Sam's been a part of, Brandon's been a part of, Moses. We've all kind of had some role in kind of launching that for the last couple of years. There's a lot of good information in there. But the program for the evening is, like I said, we have a list of questions. We're going to kind of go through and ask. It's pretty informal. Some of us have been doing this, like I said, for 15 years. So there's some humor that we interject. It's historically, it can be seen as a pretty stressful process. And we, as a collective group, I think we all really feel like it can also be a lot of fun. And if you take it and you just look at it through that really serious lens, it can be really hard. But if you interject some humor and you make it be fun, then it's not as stressful and daunting for students as they go through it. So, Sarah has tasked me with the first question.
Oh, wait, before we start, we're going to just let all
Oh, yeah, we should let everybody introduce
let all the
themselves.
reps who are here introduce themselves. So we have a variety of reps here from different colleges, and I hope that we could just go through each person and just let us know where you're from. So we'll start with Chris. Chris, you're muted.
There we go. Couldn't unmute myself, and no one told me this was casual. So I'm wearing a tie, but I can
Feel free
get rid
to
of
take the
that.
tie off.
No.
I'll get rid of it. Yes, immediately. So my name is Chris Felix. I'm an associate director of admissions from St. Lawrence University.
Well, thanks. And Moses?
Now it's more casual.
Here we go.
Casual.
Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Moses Murphy. I'm the director of admissions at the University of Vermont. Happy to be here. As Russ said, I don't know how many years in a row this is, but it's always a program I enjoy taking part in.
Curran, or I'm sorry, I'm mispronouncing your name.
Curran.
Curran.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name's Curran Dillis. I am from Rochester Institute of Technology. Was that all the information we needed to give? All right, great.
Yes. And Emily?
Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm Emily Rudolph. I'm Associate Director of Admissions with Champlain College. I'm really excited to be here tonight. I'm also a Champlain College alum from the class of 2014 and 2024, because I also just finished another program with them. So double alum from Champlain. Happy to be chatting with you all tonight.
And Logan?
Hey, everyone. My name is Logan Lanfear. I'm Assistant Director of Admissions over here at St. Michael's College.
Sam?
Hello out there. I'm Sam Prouty. I'm Director of Admissions at Middlebury.
And Brandon?
Hey everyone, I'm Brandon Kennedy. I'm one of the Associate Directors of Admission at Vermont State University.
Excellent. Thanks all.
I just signed up for my counselor luncheon, Brandon.
Which one are you going to go to?
Williston, of course.
Oh, nice. I'm surprised you're not coming down to Castleton.
Thought about it, but
Come back to the old stomping grounds.
maybe. Yeah, so I am a Castleton alumni, and Sarah's a
St. Lawrence
St.
University.
Lawrence alumni. And we asked Curran to be a part of the panel tonight because we felt all along we had a really good representative sample of colleges from this area. But some of the feedback we've received has been looking for more representation from some of the institutes of technology. A lot of our students apply to RIT, so it just made sense to reach out to RIT. And I'm a Rochester native. That might not be the last Rochester reference that goes out there. But Curran was kind enough to join us. So just to put some of this process into context, it might not be the best question to ask first, but I'm going to ask, how many applications do you personally read every year? Because this is, I think families think that this is big and believe that it's big, but I want to put it into context and paint a bit of a picture for them as we're talking about these things. And then I'll ask a couple follow-up questions. So how many applications do you read a year? Just popcorn around.
On average, the typical Middlebury reader will sort of be in charge of reading about 1,000.
Yeah, at St. Lawrence, when all is said and done, with scholarship reviews and things, I'll be right around 1,000 to 1,200.
At Vermont State, it's a little bit different as well. Our admission counselors read based off of program, so it varies from counselor to counselor. But in my role, I'll read probably close to 25 to 3,000 applications, 2,500 to 3,000 applications, and then I have some other colleagues that do that as well too. But at the entry level reads, it's much smaller. The volume is so counselors get to know their students really well with us.
Yeah, similar to Brandon, we read by major or by program. And yeah, a typical counselor will read about 1,000 in a given year from early decision to regular decision.
Yeah, and at Champlain, we're reading based off of our territories. So based off of the state that a student comes from. So I'm reading for Vermont students this year. And about the same as well, about 1,000 across the board that we're reading. But we work to make sure we're available for families and students to connect with us throughout the entire process.
And UVM, we also read by territory, and our top readers are around that 1,200 mark as well.
Same thing as UVM and Champlain too. Personally, I should say personally, I read around 500 to 800 a year based on the territory. We have other counselors who are closer to the 1,000 mark.
So as our students begin this search, like one of the things that I probably should have mentioned at the beginning, and I'm going to mention now, and we'll probably mention again, is first semester we reserve to meet with seniors so we can finalize their applications, get them really going in their individual processes and finish their processes, write their letters of rec. So first semester is largely senior based. Second semester we reserve to work with the juniors. So I'm curious. We moved platforms. We changed platforms from Naviance to Score. We feel like Score just provides a better interface for students. It just reads and flows and is more intuitive for students. I'm not wedded to my Fairbanks students using Score. I don't think any of the school counselors are wedded to their students using Score. I'm curious if you all have a favorite college search platform that you would put out there to the group as one that students might and families might look at using. I'm famous for calling on people if you don't volunteer.
I don't have a favorite one, but I will say for Vermont State University, this is like a loaded question because we're in the midst of, well, we've gone through a pretty massive transformation where we've combined three small public state universities into one singular university across the state. So our search platforms are a little bit all over the place. Our marketing teams are working really hard to make sure that the correct data is there. So I would say not all search tools are completely accurate when it comes to like graduation data and information like that. We're for us personally, we're in the process of trying to get everything updated, but they all take, everything takes a little bit of time with those kinds of big shifts that we have. But I think my favorite search resource is school counselors. Not gonna give a plug there to you all. School counselors have a lot of knowledge. They get visits from a lot of schools and a lot of college reps, and we send a lot of information to them. And I know uh, you all have really great school counselors right here at CVU that take a lot of time to get to know us. Like Russ mentioned, coming to counselor breakfasts and going on college tours and things like that. They can speak a lot to experience, historical experience, and things like that. So your school counselor is great.
Anybody else going to top Mr. Kennedy?
I would just add that we have the internet, and it's a terrific resource for a lot of things, but you can also find a lot of just not really helpful information there. So, if you're reading reviews and it's someone who went there for 3 years and they've written a really thoughtful reflection on their experience, then that might be helpful. But someone who did a tour on February 2nd when it was -3 and they hated it, that might not be your best source. So consider that. And I think as you look through the college landscape, a lot of these websites are pay to play. I know that because I've looked at some of the costs. They're not, these are tens of thousands of dollars, and we're nonprofit institutions. So as you're going through those, I think just, when you're comparing college to college, whether it's on Score, College Board, Niche, whatever you're looking at, recognize that just because a profile's not there doesn't mean that the school's not of the caliber for that or whatever. They just didn't make that investment. Brandon touched on it. It's their marketing team that is putting this together. If you stick with your counselor and nearby schools, I always tell folks who are starting their search, if you're visiting St. Lawrence and you don't know if you want a liberal arts college, visit Clarkson too. They're 15 minutes down the road. They're a fantastic tech school. And then you can start to narrow your list down there, and you don't have to fly halfway across the country to do it. So that would be just to add on to what Brandon said.
Well, that's I asked the question to see if school counselors would come up, because I've been doing this job for almost 30 years. Sarah's been doing it for almost as long. Like, we have that institutional knowledge of what schools and what academic profiles work best for our students. And we know that there's good things about all those electronic platforms, and there's not so great things. But the most important thing, and why Sarah and I ask everybody that's on this panel to be on the panel, is everybody here is within a day's drive. And so if you're wanting to see, let's say St. Lawrence, and then you want to go see RIT, and there's some schools along that Route 80 or I-80 corridor, like there's a bunch of places you can go see and make a weekend trip. You can go see Middlebury, Castleton, come back and see UVM, and on another weekend you could hit Champlain and Vermont State University and St. Michael's. Like, we're all within a day, and you can see big schools, little schools. You can get the complete spectrum, and then begin to make some forays into how to refine your search from there. Okay, I'm going to jump into some questions that I've actually been getting lately, and I'm really curious to get your thoughts, because a lot of students have been asking me this question. Thoughts on dual enrollment versus AP. If you have an opportunity to take a dual enrollment course, is it better to receive a lower grade in that dual enrollment course, or take the AP exam? And then I'm going to pick on a couple local schools, and I'm not picking on them because I think one is better than the other, but this is a question that I've heard and I want to put it out there. Which is better, a community college dual enrollment class or a UVM dual enrollment class? So, Curran, you might not chime in on the CCV UVM spectrum, but you might have thoughts on, is it better to get that dual enrollment grade of a C or take the AP exam and get a 3?
Sure. Would you like me to address that right now?
Sure, go ahead. That's my
Um,
subtle way of tagging you.
well, I will say, our Office of the Registrar has a really great public resource where students can check and see what credits transfer, and we accept a lot of credits from CCV and UVM. Either way, if a student's taking a dual enrollment, course or an AP course, that's a standout thing to us. Typically, for dual enrollment courses, we want to see a grade of a C or higher, and for AP credit, we want to see a grade of 3 or higher on those exams. Really, whatever a student has access to and whatever fits into their day, as long as they're challenging themselves and doing something rigorous, it's going to stand out in a positive way for us.
I could maybe add on to that just a little bit.
Okay.
But I will say that going right along with what Curran just said, we do have different requirements for all of our AP tests in terms of scores in order to get credit for that. So that's just something that is particularly specific to St. Mike's for a student who is looking at maybe, should I take an AP or should I go to a community college class? But same thing with Curran, we're not going to necessarily say either one is better than the other. They both show that student is kind of going above and beyond and trying to put in a little bit more than what you could call average, I guess you could say. But definitely make sure that you're paying attention. And it's also pretty handy too, if you have a rough idea of what you're going to go to school for. Your particular high school might offer an AP class that kind of lines up a little bit better with what you might be able to take for a dual enrollment. Or it could be the other way around, just talking about what you might need for your major down the road.
Could I chime in with
Absolutely, Sam.
a little bit of a thought? I just got my tax forms in the mail today, so I guess I'm thinking about money. I would like to make a financial point related to this, and that is that not all colleges will actually award you credit for that dual enrollment class that you take at a college. And so Middlebury does not. And so if one of the incentives of taking the college class over the AP is, well, I'll get college credit for that course, that's great and a very real incentive. But just know out there that not every college will actually award you that credit. And so depending on where you think you want to go, my advice is in most cases, the AP class would be considered more rigorous than whatever the dual enrollment is, unless that dual enrollment is something even higher than you could take in high school, like linear algebra or multivariable calculus or, some very high level something. But if it's, AP European history versus introduction to history at a community college, we probably would see the AP as more rigorous. And so I would say your decision should be based on 2 factors, not just the rigor question, but also the financial one. And if you're in a position to take a bunch of dual enrollments and that will give you, 4 college credits before you even begin college, that's great. And that is has the potential to save you, some tuition dollars down the road.
Okay, next question. I'm going to back up a second because I realized I skipped a question. And I'm curious, now that we're several years out from COVID and largely all back in person, campus visits, are they looking fairly traditional in the sense that they're larger groups going on tours, accessing all the buildings on campus, that kind of stuff? Or is a big part of a student's tour experience largely still virtual?
I'll jump in to share about Champlain. Sorry, Moses,
Sure.
I absolutely just jumped over you. No, we are back. Our doors are open. We are looking at a much more traditional tour as we had pre-COVID. However, that doesn't mean we haven't really adjusted with the technology that's available now with Zoom. Champlain's hosting a virtual open house next week, actually. Whew, wow, that's next week. And so that, any family or student that may not health-wise have the ability to travel, especially deep in flu and whatever's going around season, or families that are, 1,000+ miles away, but that they really want to check out these schools. So we want to keep those virtual components available for anybody. And we really look at anything from a larger event like a virtual open house all the way down to getting to sign up for one-on-ones Zoom meetings with admissions counselors. But anytime we can get a family on campus, we'd love to have them.
And that was my assumption, but some schools might be different. All right. One of my favorite questions, because every year, Sarah and I and all the other counselors, we will sit down with a student who will then rattle off the 15 people that they want to receive a letter of recommendation from. Personally, I don't know 15 people that I would ask. I don't know that 15 people like me well enough to write me a letter of recommendation. So who do you like to see letters of recommendation from? And how many letters should a student send? Moses, you've been exceptionally quiet, my friend.
Yeah, well, listen, I don't want to talk over anybody. This is all great information. I think the most helpful letters of recommendation are academic in nature and will come either from a school counselor or from a teacher. And I think the benefit of a recommendation is it provides us insight into a student's candidacy that can't be found elsewhere in the application. And so you'll often get insight into things like perseverance or grit, creativity, problem solving, work habits, things of that nature. And the letter of recommendation, sometimes that are most helpful don't necessarily come from the teachers who teach the subjects where you do the best, right? It could come from the teacher who teaches a subject where maybe you have to work a little harder, and the teacher can speak to that. To your question about volume, I wouldn't put a number on it other than to say, they do start to become redundant. And I think the more you send, you kind of water down the benefit, in that they start to detract from each other. And so I think it's important to be thoughtful about, who can really speak to your strengths and your ability, to give that person plenty of notice, recognizing that they may have many students that are making the same request of them. But I don't think in this case, more is better, I guess would be the takeaway.
I would agree with that. Typically, we all said we read about 1,000 applications. So I like to say 3 to 4 is the sweet spot for us. Because that means over the course of a season, I'll read 3,000 to 4,000 letters of rec. I personally like to see, one from a school counselor, because they typically know what's going on with the student, assuming, the student has a good relationship with them. But then, like Moses said, a teacher or 2 teachers, and then maybe a coach or an employer if the student has a job or that type of thing. And yeah, I've had my impression of a student changed if I see that they have a certain grade in a subject matter, and then that teacher in that course says, well, they're a great student, they really tried hard. That can mean more than, another 6 letters of recommendation from teachers who maybe don't know the student as well.
Yeah, the best, I tell students all the time, the best letter of recommendation I ever read was for a student who got a C in AP biology. And that teacher was able to speak to all the study sessions that student went to, all of the work that student did to really dig in and get that C, and most of all, not quit. So I think that all of that comes out in the letters, but I don't want to say fewer is better, but I would say let's not overwhelm these folks. They have all their schools have kind of a maximum and a minimum set that we pay attention to. As they've said, a couple of them have said, you know, a counselor letter and a couple teacher letters. That's what we like to hold students to if we can, just because it does tend to overwhelm and slow the entire system down.
If I can just add very quick, I'll be very blunt, which I am.
That's why we love you, Sam.
The least helpful ones are from people who don't know the kid, but you all think that they are a powerful person at that institution. So if your third cousin's barber's wife happens to know the head of the trustee, you know, the head trustee at that school, but that person has no idea who your kid is, don't ask them to write a recommendation, because it won't help. Those kinds of, you know, that perception of the powerful recommendation or the connected recommendation, that's more myth than it is reality. And it really would only be helpful if that person has a genuine, long-standing, true relationship with the applicant. The other thing, in which I've been doing this 25 years, 25 years ago, I never, ever read an application with a parent letter of recommendation in it. That has taken off. And I'm a parent. I have 2 children. Like, I get it. I feel bad for all of you out there who have children, because there's no way that your children are anywhere near as cool as my children. And I know that we all feel that way. But you should not write your own child a letter of recommendation.
And how often do you see, I'm going to piggyback on that because I saw 2 this year, and many over the years, where parents' emails was the point of contact in the Common App. Do you find that when you're looking at applications?
More
Yeah,
often.
I mean, obviously, parents, you're important, no doubt. You're an important part of this process, but this is your kid's process, right? So if somebody's going to email the college with a question, it probably should be the kid, not the parent. If somebody's going to call, it should be the kid, not the parent. We're happy to talk to you, parents, but once you're doing the majority of the communicating, that's when you need to raise the red flag and say, you know, something is not quite right here.
And that's a role that we, Sarah and I, and all the school counselors love playing. Is we love sitting down with a student. I sat down with a student. We must have been on hold with the University of blank, not one of these schools, for 45 minutes, waiting for them to pick up the phone for them to answer a couple simple questions about an application. But that's part of our role with the students in this process, is really sitting down with them and helping them manage some of these frustrating, cumbersome pieces of the application process. All right, I don't want to take up the entire half hour.
Can I just jump in quickly and no, I think Sam touched on this. There is a place for parents to jump in and reach out with us. I want to be sensitive to the fact that the college costs are extremely high right now. You're effectively buying a very expensive boat, and it's an experience for your child. And you have a lot of questions about how you're going to manage that cost. What does that experience look like? What is the return on that investment? Those are all fair game questions. It's the communication about a student's fit, academic, with the application, things like that we want to have that authentic connection with the student. I'm sorry, Russ, but I just wanted to make sure that parents.
Oh, no, you're good.
Yeah.
So my last question of the night, although I probably won't be able to shut up, has to do with being test optional. I know that there were a lot of schools who were test optional pre-COVID. Everybody kind of swung in the test optional direction as a result of COVID, and now the pendulum is swinging somewhere in the middle. But I'm really hoping that you all can take the lead for a couple minutes and talk to us about what does test optional mean, not just around tests, SAT or ACT, but what does it mean in terms of the application? Are there pieces that you're looking at with a little bit more of a fine-tooth comb than others, like the essay or the letters of rec? Just take us through kind of that test optional process, if you would, for a couple minutes.
I can jump in because this also kind of goes back to the last question about recommendations as well for Vermont State, because we have as an institution have kind of evolved our admission requirements and admission standards for different programs and in different times. And in an effort to eliminate barriers, we've gone optional for a lot of components to the application. We are recommendation optional for most of our academic programs, minus some of our more selective that have very small seat count programs. Things like professional pilot or nursing would still require a letter of recommendation. But for a student that's interested in studying business at Vermont State University, they can essentially apply with an application and a transcript. And I think that's great for the right student. But whenever these questions about optional components of the application comes up, I always talk to students about playing to your strengths and really having a conversation of why I would leave something out of my application or why I would include it. And I think for the right student, there's a letter of recommendation, as my colleagues have said already, can really speak volume and really give us some more depth and some character to a student's academic performance. And SATs and ACT standardized tests kind of hold the same weight as well. They're a snapshot for the most part for many institutions, and we understand that. We understand there's a lot of test anxiety. They come at a cost. It can, we understand all of those things. But for some students who maybe, their first couple of years of high school, it wasn't for them, right? They're, coming out of a challenging experience. Maybe they bit off more than they could chew academically and are kind of junior and senior year finally finding their stride. And that's great. But in some cases, they need to show just a little bit more information to us as colleges. And that's where an SAT score, can really show, hey, I did understand the concepts while maybe I didn't get the grades. And that can be a great tipping scale. So what I always tell students is play to your strengths. If you need to add some more depth and some more information to your profile as a candidate for a particular university or program, definitely consider submitting those test scores or submitting letters of recommendation. Optional essays too. Some programs require essays for, if you'd like to be considered for a scholarship. It's optional, and some students are going to choose to do it. Some students are going to choose to not do it. Those that choose to do it, we have the information to really evaluate them with a little bit more detail. Those that choose to hold it out, we're just going off of the information that we have. So I think to that point, they hold merit and they can really hold some value, but they're not the end all be all either.
I think this is one of many examples in this process where, you're going to need to do research, because I think, everything is just going to vary from school to school as to, what their policies are, what's optional versus recommended. Certain things will be required for some programs and not others, as Brendan had just alluded to. So this is definitely a category where I think it depends, and you're going to have to do research. I think for schools that say that something is optional, I think it's important for students to understand that is truly optional. That it's not sort of like a wink optional, wherein you're actually being penalized for not doing something that we're calling optional. So that would be the one of the takeaways that I would hope students and families have, is that when we say optional, we truly mean that. And that you should think about your candidacy and put forth what you think best represents, your strengths and what you can add to the community at the schools you're applying to.
I would add, just to kind of reiterate what Moses said, St. Lawrence has been test optional since 2005. There's no fine print there. It doesn't affect your admit, waitlist, or deny decision, nor your candidacy for any of our academic merit scholarships. That being said, you do need to do your research, because your test scores can hurt you. And that is really where my heart gets broken as an advocate for the rural student. And so if your counselors say, don't send those scores to St. Lawrence, don't listen to your uncle who says, you need to send them to St. Lawrence, because your uncle doesn't know as much as your counselors. And so it's really making sure that you're following the professionals and paying attention to the requirements for each school, because it's really tough for us to see an application where a student is on track for something fantastic, but they've shot themselves in the foot with a really low SAT score.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with Chris, as well as really what everyone has said, in that it does vary by school. I know our process, we practice holistic application review, which means that we will look at everything you send us. And so we are test optional, and we have been since the pandemic, and I believe we will continue to be. But we also practice differential admission. So if we look at everything that you send us, we're also going to be looking at the college that you're interested in, majoring in. So our requirements for things like SATs, GPA, et cetera, are going to vary based on whether you want to come here for engineering or maybe liberal arts or fine arts. And that's also where I think the test optional stuff comes into play. If you have a really strong math SAT and maybe not such a great, critical or the other part of the SAT, sorry, I got tongue tied. That can still reflect positively on you, but we post a range of the SAT scores that our last incoming class had. And the way students should interpret that for us is that's the middle 50%. So, a quarter of your classmates are going to come in with an SAT score that's lower, and a quarter are going to be even higher. And that's based off of about 50% of applicants who actually sent in their scores. So there's a lot of moving pieces, especially for us as a bigger school, but that's kind of how we break it down. And it is a lot to take in, which is, I think, where school counselors and college counselors really come into play.
I don't want to beat
ahead.
the scores to death, or maybe I do actually, but I will also say that scores, like every other component of an application, do not exist in a vacuum, right? So let's meditate on that for a minute. If you have amazing scores and you are in the top 2% of your class, you have straight A's, you've taken all the hardest classes, really all that score does is confirm what we already know, which is that you're wicked smart. Let's say that you have top scores and a B- average. You might think the score will help, but if we want to think that through, frankly, all the score then tells us is that you're wicked crazy smart, but for some reason you're not putting the power to the pavement every day in class, right? Vice versa, that straight A student with a score that's a little lower is making it happen every day, day in and day out, where it does count. So they never exist in a vacuum. And the final thing I'll say is that at least at Middlebury, no score is just an absolute number, right? So, let's a 1420 SAT score. Is that a good score? I don't know, because one of the first things we're going to look at is what is that score relative not only to our average, but also to the averages at the school that you attend. And so I read the Boston area, among other places. In Boston, if you live in Concord or Newton or Winchester or Wellesley, you live in a town where all the houses are over $1 million. Most of the parents are highly educated. There is a high level of educational attainment. Scores are high in those towns, right? So a 1420 in Wellesley is a very different animal than a 1420 in Lynn or Dorchester, which is demographically and socioeconomically radically different. And so all of that is to say the score never exists in a vacuum. And so think about it relative to your transcript and relative to, the surround that has produced you. That's how we look at it.
Emily, did you have something to add?
Yeah, just one final piece. I think there's so much wonderful information being shared right now. But if I were a parent or a student listening to this, I think I would feel really overwhelmed. So my piece of advice through this process is talk to your high school counselors and talk to the admissions counselor directly with the college. If a student were to share with me what their scores were with separate from, submitting their application, and I say, don't submit those, and then I get to your application and I can remember your score, I am not factoring that in. You did not submit those scores. I am not factoring that into your review. So when in doubt, ask. Just by asking, that is not penalizing you in any way. We want to help you. We want to get you to success. So please don't hesitate to reach out.
And one of the beautiful things about kind of the evolution of this evening is it was live and in person many years ago, and it was a one and done. And parents would call us and they'd say, what did we miss? And we'd have to, like, in 30 words or less, go over what they missed by not being present. But because this is going out to the YouTubes, as my father would call it, it's always there. So when parents call and say, we missed it, what did we miss? We can send them a link to this. So all of this great information from the last, 4 or 5 years that Sarah and I have done this in this format, it's all there on YouTube, including tonight. So if parents want to go back and rewatch it, they can go back and rewatch it. If families have missed it because they're at the sporting events or whatever they're doing, it's there. And so Sam's and everybody else's words of wisdom parents can go meditate on it at their leisure.
Can I just,
Sarah's turn.
well, I was just gonna actually follow up on a question. The question was not listed initially, but I think Emily brought up a really good point, and I wondered if I could just ask the team here, whoever wants to chime in, is that pretty standard that calling an admissions office, you can kind of maybe give a hypothetical, a question, or parents or students can call to just gather information about the SAT or submitting scores or other questions they have. Is that okay?
Please call us. More than
think that's-
anything, I would love to hear from families. Yes.
I think that's the reason why we still have physical offices and we're not all in our sweatpants all day. Is so people can call us. Yeah. We welcome that. And frankly, it shows that a student is interested. So I think it's a great idea.
At the risk of ticking somebody off out there, look, there are people who will happily charge you thousands of dollars to answer the questions that people on this screen would very happily answer for you for free. And we're the ones who actually do the work. So I would say call us and we'll tell you whatever you want to know. Happy to give you advice, and we're never going to charge you for it.
Thank you, and that's really helpful. Okay, I have a few more questions to ask. All right, so we're seeing an increase in students with the 504 for anxiety. What are the supports on campus for incoming students with an identified mental health need?
I think we're seeing students self-reporting these kinds of these kinds of anxiety more and more frequently now as well too. And I think all colleges and universities are really trying to support students to the best of their ability where they're at. I know, at Vermont State, we have counseling services on all of our residential campuses. We have virtual counseling services available for students. We are here to make sure that students are safe, happy, and successful. And that's our goal. And so we really try to offer a lot of different support. I think, my advice for students and families that are experiencing those kinds of challenges is to know that, as much, hopefully the message that you all take away from is don't hesitate to ask or bring this up. It's not going to hurt your candidacy for admission. It's not going to hurt your candidacy for enrolling. It's really important to let us know how we can support you. And some students have some really unique needs, and I think none of us want to not be able to support the students to the best of our ability. So if you have a unique need or question, you should call and ask, and we can try to get you in contact with the people on our campuses who can support you, and they're going to be very honest with you if we're not the best fit for you. And if our support isn't enough, then we can let you know that in a transparent way. And that's not to say that you shouldn't that you should feel any kind of discomfort with that. It's just to let you know that we want to make sure that we're as transparent with you all as we can be too. So I would say definitely don't hesitate to reach out. There's a lot of support folks on campuses. We have departments that are dedicated to student support. And there's a lot of people and a lot of layers of support at colleges. There's, your admission counselor and the first steps. Then there's, student support. There's advisors, there's faculty, there's coaches, there's residence life staff. There's a whole slew of people that are here to support students and are here for you as students. So don't hesitate to ask for support, and we're here to help.
Just to kind of continue that too, same thing here at St. Mike's. We have a whole office of student accessibility services. They're great to reach right out to. They'll happily take your phone call to discuss what you have specifically on either, an IEP or a 504 plan, anything like that. Also the admissions office too. We do know a pretty decent amount of it just because we're involved with it all the time. So we're happy to take those phone calls. I'm happy to kind of walk you through. There's a whole bunch of different things that they will provide to students. And it's really kind of one of those things where it's very individualized because every student is a little bit different. So it's hard to say, oh yeah, we can list off all the things that we offer. But it's much more it's much more student specific. So that's where it's really, really great to have that conversation to make sure that that particular school is a good fit for you. Because just like Brandon said, it could be one school is just might not be right based off of what they offer, or another school might be great.
And I think for most of us, these types of services probably fall into a couple different categories. So you have something like student accessibility services that are there to provide accommodations for students with documented needs. And then you have things that are available to all students, the UVM, the Center for Health and Wellbeing, and I'm sure all of you have something similar where students can stop by for any number of needs. So it could be medical care advising, it could be counseling and psychiatric services, individual counseling, group counseling, just general wellness. And so I think they kind of fall into two categories, in addition to sort of just the support networks that we all offer that was mentioned by Logan, things like RAs and advisors, and all of this is in addition to the academic support that students receive. So I think a lot of us have recognized the need of students, the needs plural, and have set up services to support students.
And something to expand on is the original question was, focusing on students that have documented medical needs or anxiety. And I really also want to speak to the students that are in a pretty solid spot until they get to a college campus. And lack of, a change of structure, far away from home and support system. I think there are a lot of students that think they're going to be great and then find pretty quickly that they aren't. And I would love to just, vocalize that those supports are available for students, all students at any time that they're on campus with us. And something I love to support are some of the smaller supports that we offer. So Champlain College, in our academic center, we have weekly seminars that students can come to around a variety of topics, something as simple as studying skills at a college level or taking notes at a college level, which can really help alleviate some of that feeling of being overwhelmed or falling behind, that can keep a student on a more solid structure. But everything all the way up to go to a counselor, connect with a trusted advisor or professor if any student is feeling that they need extra support or they're just not feeling really solid. There are people there to help, even if it's not something that is being detected until they get to the campus.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm going to shift gears a little bit and talk about transcripts. So you are no doubt receiving transcripts from all over the country with varied systems of reporting grades, excuse me. Do you recalculate GPAs, grade point average? How do you do this? How do you ensure that students without weighted grade point average or a narrative-based transcript are not disadvantaged?
There's every kind of transcript, A's, B's, 100s, 80s, 90s, weighted, unweighted, 120 pages of narrative assessments. Some of them use pictograms. So, the kids are talking in the hallway like, oh, I just got my report card and I got 3 sunshines and 2 clouds. So, we're pretty well experienced at figuring out what transcripts mean. And everybody here might give you a different answer. In fact, I know that Moses is going to give a different answer than I will, for example. But at Mid, we do not recalculate a GPA if you at the school are already calculating it. And so we take your GPA as it stands, whether it's weighted or unweighted, and no matter what scale it's on. Obviously, if it's unweighted, we're doing our own assessment of the curriculum because, 2 students who each have a 97 average, one of them took all the hardest classes and one of them took all the easiest classes. So, not all 97s are created equal. But in the interest of brevity, I will just say we see every kind of transcript imaginable. We read the transcript relative to that school and the profile that you're sending us that allows us to interpret that transcript based on how you do business, right? So I'm not comparing the CVU transcript to the Middlebury Union transcript because that's apples and oranges, right? So just trying to figure out what's your scale, What are you using? What are the hardest classes you offer? Are you weighting that number or are you not? And we go from there.
All right, Moses, you're up. Sam put you on the spot.
Yeah, and I think the difference there that he alluded to is we are going to recalculate in cases where we can do that. There will be cases where either we can or it'd be harmful to the student, but in many cases it's about uniforming the sort of numeric evaluation of the student's performance, and so we'll recalculate that onto a weighted 5.0 scale, and then evaluate you within the context of your high school. But there is a recalculation that's going to occur to try to get everybody on a uniform scale for 85% of our applications.
At St. Lawrence, we also do a recalculation. We recalculate GPAs to a 100-point scale for the same exact reasons UVM does. But then we do exactly what Middlebury does and looks at it in the context of that group. I'm just curious if we all use the same CRM. Are we all Slate schools? Yeah, so that is the customer relationship manager that we all use. And as a reader, one of the things that I have, if I'm reading an application from CVU and I say, well, let's see, I've got a 95 on our scale with this many AP and this many honors classes, how have we read that in the last 5, 6, 7 cycles historically? So even if a new person comes in, they have all of that context so they can say, oh, wow, CVU's a really rigorous school. We want to make sure we're acknowledging that curriculum, and they're going to read a little bit differently than a 95 from a rural school in Texas. Let's pick on Texas.
Thank you. So I'm going to just have a couple questions about the essay. So as part of the applications, the required essay, what has been your favorite type of applicant essay that you've read over the years? And any advice you would give students writing their essay?
And we picked this question because all juniors will take our writing composition class. And in that writing composition class, a part of that class is students will see all of the Common App prompts and spend time working on an initial draft, hopefully they'll get to a final draft of their Common App essay. So we're kind of asking that question through that lens, knowing that students are going to get some support in the building writing that essay.
Something that I think we've all touched on to a degree is trying to find the student in this, digital 2-dimensional space that is their application. So, what some of my biggest piece of advice to students when it comes to the essay is what have I not, as the admissions counselor reading your application, what have I not learned about you yet based off of everything else I've gotten in your application? What do you really want me to know about you that I'm not getting anywhere else? Tell me about it in that essay in your own words. And then my second piece of advice, and it sounds like students at the school are going to have the support, is have it proofread at least once before you're submitting it. That is a big factor that we review. But at the end of the day, I just want to hear from the student, and I want to know what they want me to know about them, which isn't always the best advice because that can still be pretty broad, but usually that helps move them along a bit.
Yeah, to add on to that, I really enjoy essays where students get creative with their presentation. So like, to tip my hand, I'm actually a first-time reader. This is my first admissions cycle. But 2 of my favorites have been from a student who basically presented her growth through the lens of different Dungeons and Dragons characters she had played. And I also recently read a student who basically talked about being the ordinary kid and acknowledged, that aspect of his personality and that he liked things like Legos and playing sports and all that stuff, with sort of the tongue-in-cheek caveat of oh, well, everyone's going to be writing about the trip they took to Mount Everest or whatever the case may be, right? So I mean, exactly like Emily said, I want to get to know the student through the essay a little bit. My biggest piece of advice is that if you're going to write about, something sensitive or something difficult that happened to you, there's also the additional information section of the Common App, which can be more helpful or maybe gives you more of an opportunity to really flesh out what you want colleges to know about you. So for example, if you have something you're passionate about, but you also got in a car accident junior year that impacted your grades, you can use those two sections to different effect and really pass on good information to us in different ways.
You know, every year I have a different favorite essay, and they're almost never even remotely about the same topic. And so I think, you know, what you have to be careful of, or a pitfall I see students falling into is, you know, they either pick a topic or they write in a way, you know, to try to imagine what we want to hear or what topic we would like. And I think that, you know, the point of an essay is to be authentic. And again, the best essays I generally read are not about life-changing events or anything like that. It gives me daily insight or insight into sort of the daily life of the student, and then connects that to their transition to college and what they'll do on our campus. But I think the worst thing you can do is try to guess what we want to hear or the topics that we're going to be amused by, and really think about authentically, what is your story?
Sam, you're not going to talk about Olive the horse?
Well, so it was Pickles.
Pickles.
So we have nobody tonight has yet said the word fun. So I just want to
I
put
did at
out
the
there.
very beginning.
You said you were going to be funny, but and the jury, you know, the jury is out on that, Russ. But I do think that people should know that this process is a lot of fun. It's fun to get to know a college. And on our side, the reason we do this work, because God knows it's not the paycheck, is because it's a lot of fun to get to know you. And so to me, talking about the essay is by far the most fun part of an application to read. It is what gives us a taste of who you are, what makes you tick, who are you going to be into the future, who are you in the process of becoming, what does your voice sound like, what kind of roommate, what kind of friend are you going to be. It's a wonderful opportunity to have your humanity inside that application. So don't just regurgitate your resume. Don't just make a brag sheet. You know, really allow yourself to use that essay to show us a little bit of who you are in a way that we might not otherwise get to know. And, you know, Russ asked for favorite essays. I don't really know why. My least favorite essay is always the I just want to tell you about how much I love my horse essay. You know, I have one seared in my brain, right? Like, I want to tell you about my best friend. I see my best friend every single day after school, and she's been my best friend since I was 3. And she's there for me no matter what, on good days or bad, in rain or snow or shine. We always spend the afternoon together. You probably think my best friend is my classmate from down the road, but in fact, my best friend is Pickles the horse. You know, I just don't think that helps us get to know you, right? So the litmus test should be, are we getting to know you better through what you've written? Are we hearing your voice? Are we getting a sense of who you are, you know, beyond a resume? The topic can be very small. You can write a beautiful, brilliant essay about your favorite flavor of ice cream, and you can write a really dull essay about the fact that you have just cured cancer. And so, you know, have your voice in it, have your humanity in it. And that's what keeps us reading these thousands of applications.
I think my favorite essay that I've read in the years that I've been doing this is the young person who wrote about how they organized the books in their room. It wasn't by the Dewey Decimal System, wasn't alphabetical by author, it wasn't by series. It was by which main characters would be friends. And then gave a couple examples highlighting why Winnie the Pooh was right next to Charlie from Flowers for Algernon, and why Rascalinets was like in the closet on the other side of the room. It wasn't the student didn't set out to do anything more than just talk about, you know, a passion of theirs, which was reading. But in that simple essay, it said an awful lot about that particular student. Sarah asked about essays. We're talking about essays. I have to ask, what, if anything, are you all doing regarding AI in essays? Or is that like, I just opened the can of worms and I need to close the lid because we're out of time?
I'll just say really fast. My team and I did come across at least one that we were like, oh yeah, no, that's AI. And we reached out to the students counselor. We gave them a heads up that this is what we're receiving, and if you want to speak to the student, we take another essay, and we really just work to loop the counselor in, so that we could all be on the same page, and the counselors know the students best on the high school side compared to us. So we wanted to give them a heads up to kind of approach the student about that. So right now that's what we're doing.
But you haven't seen many that you're aware of.
Not many that are blatant. My team and I, we do use AI to a degree, in the task support way, and also in a way that we can be familiar with it, and so that it can help us touch base with it. And I think really so far there's only been 2 that were like, this is copy pasted straight from. That's about the most that we're doing right now, but it's something that my team and I, we talk about pretty consistently.
I am quite sure that I'm the oldest college representative here. I still use a rotary phone. I have an abacus to balance my checkbook. I'm going to admit to you, I might not know if you've used AI in your essay, but what I will also say is I absolutely know when you haven't. And what I mean by that is a truly excellent personal essay that has a distinctive human voice in it is very easy to spot. So I might not know which ones are AI written, but the truth is the AI ones aren't that good. The really good ones can only be written by a human being, because that's the thing we're looking to get out of that piece of writing anyway.
I would absolutely agree. I think from the AI writing that I've seen, and we did do some training and review for reading essays and that type of thing. They're very smoothed over. It's very much like I don't know. There are very few actual details, and typically the structure is very bland. So you're frankly shooting yourself in the foot if you use AI to do anything more than maybe organize your ideas and figure out what is going to go where. I work at a tech school, and I graduated from that tech school fairly recently. You're going to get in trouble if you're caught using AI in college. So don't make a habit of it in high school.
I would just add that you're giving up the opportunity to speak today. Unless you have a time machine, you can't go back to 9th grade and fix that geometry grade. But you can tell us who you are today. And we're all in the business of student development. So who do you want to be? And if you choose to have AI deliver that message, okay. But in such a competitive process, not just for admission, but for scholarships, it seems that, I would want my voice to be heard and not give up that part of this.
A lot of head nodding. Thank you, Chris, Curran, Sam, Moses, Emily, Logan, Brandon. It's now 7:05. We've kept you longer than the prescribed hour. We've touched on maybe half of our questions, but we are really grateful to have you all with us. Those of you who are new, I hope it was fun. I hope it was, there I used the term, Sam, casual. Yeah. I'm really, Sarah and I are really grateful that you spend time with us and with our families and with our students, and go on camera and put it out in perpetuity on the YouTubes so that families can, in our district or perhaps not, have access to this information. So we're grateful, and thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you all.
And we didn't have any questions on the YouTube, so we're closing here. Thank you guys. Really appreciate it. Have a nice night.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Night.
Take care, everyone.
I can stay on the call and talk about garbage plates now if you want.
They aren't my favorite, but I do like a good Shaler's burger and plate of onion rings down by the lake.
Alrighty, well, this was a real pleasure.